What's up, y'all? Ty back here reacting to I tracked every Michael Jordan playoff game for a decade. Now, no coffee yet. I'm drinking some Propel today, and no, it's not a Propel advertisement, but I need some electrolytes, okay? So I ran 4 miles this morning, woke up and ran. I'm training for a marathon. Anyways, besides the fact, I'm going to be reacting to I tracked every Michael Jordan playoff game for a decade, thinking basketball. Shout out to him for this video. One thing, as I've been watching these NBA videos lately, I'm super invested in Michael Jordan right now. Looking at the prime of MJ, what he was like at his peak. So I'm eager to watch Michael Jordan's playoff game for a decade, every single one of them.
So we all know that Michael Jordan was an incredible basketball player. For many people, he's the undisputed GOAT. And in the Thinking Basketball Greatest Peak series, our Patreon community voted him #1. But one topic...
I feel like everybody consensus has MJ at #1. Outside of me, I have Will, but...
topic that always comes up with MJ is his teammate quality. In 1994, Jordan retired, and without him, the Bulls won a hefty 55 games.
That is crazy that they made it that far without MJ, and you know, if he's the GOAT. Look at how teams fare without LeBron James, for example. When he left Cleveland the first time, they became horrible. When he left Miami, they were not good, or nearly as good. And then, you know, when he left Cleveland again, they're not great. And so that's my whole thing.
And played the Eastern champion Knicks to a near draw, leading some people to think he might have been playing with a stacked deck. Others think those championships were all about Jordan because he finally embraced the team game in 1991 under the Zen master Phil Jackson. To help answer this question, we went back and tracked 129 Michael Jordan playoff games.
That's a ridiculous amount.
Compare MJ and his teammates to what we've learned over the last quarter century. As we've discussed many times, there's no easy way to measure how good an NBA player is. We use basic stats like points per game or shooting efficiencies in conjunction with more advanced ones like how much a player improved his teammate shot quality, but there's no silver bullet. What most of us are really trying to figure out is how much a player helps his team win, how much his presence...
Yeah, what's their impact on winning? That should be the only thing that matters.
...impacts the scoreboard. And that's where one particular stat is always worth knowing, even if it isn't perfect itself. I'm talking about plus minus. And
but when I use the plus minus stat, I get cooked. Plus minus is a good stat, man. It's a good stat. It's not the be all end all, but it's a good stat.
Playoff plus minus has only been tracked since the 1996-97 season, which means we have no information on those early Jordan teams. Well, until now. For instance, in 1988, a fourth-year Jordan won his first MVP and the Defensive Player of the Year in the regular season, while carrying the likes of Charles Oakley and Dave Korzemba to 50 wins. The Bulls played 10 postseason games that year, defeating the Cavs in 5 before bowing out to the Pistons. And in that 10-game stretch, Chicago was outscored by about 4 points every 48 minutes Jordan was on the court. When he went to the bench, they were outscored by 8 points per 48.
See, you cannot tell me that that's a useless stat. That matters.
Which is about a 4-point difference.
That matters.
As longtime Thinking Basketball followers know, 10 games is a really small sample, especially since Jordan only went to the bench for about 50 minutes during those playoffs. That means a few extra makes or misses would have a huge impact on those minutes that Jordan was off the floor.
Yes and no.
So to understand how Chicago performed without MJ, we really need to look at more games. In 1989, Jordan hit the shot over Craig Elo, and the Bulls upset the Cleveland Cavaliers, then took out the Knicks before running into the Pistons again. This time, Jordan's on-off looked very different. The Bulls outscored their opponents by 4 points every 48 minutes he was on the court, but were outscored by nearly 20 points per 40.
This is Jokic type stuff to the extreme. That is ridiculous. That's ridiculous. You cannot sit up here and tell me the plus minus stat is useless. You can't do it. This is nuts.
When he was off the court. That gives us 27 total games now, but it's still a noisy sample.
It is, but, you know, consistency matters.
He went ahead and collected the 1990 playoffs and the 91 playoffs, and so on. After sifting through over 100 Bulls playoff games, we found some incredible gems, including a ringing endorsement for the channel,
thinking basketball every day,
and this incredible quote about not wanting to excel as a three-point shooter.
Three-point shooting is something that I don't want to excel at. And when you have that mentality, as I found out in the first game, of making threes, you don't go to the hole as much. You go to the three-point line and you start sitting there waiting for someone to find you. And that's not my mentality. And I don't want to.
It's low-key facts. You've seen it before. When somebody knocks down a three, they kind of sit out there.
Create that because it takes away from my other parts of my game.
Michael was talking about threes because he made 6 of them in the first half of Game 1 against Portland back in the '92 finals, propelling him to 35 points before halftime on just 21 shots.
35
before
before
night,
halftime.
Jordan had made at least 5 threes in a game just once in his entire career, and he knocked down a half dozen before halftime. Thanks to the shrug, that
his shot was pretty nice, man. It looked smooth.
Performance is still talked about 30 years later, but I don't think I've seen anyone mention what happened next in Game 2. Those three-point shots were only half the story to Game 1 because Jordan was just as unstoppable from inside the arc, drilling 8.
Okay, I gotta show y'all something. Look at how clogged the paint is. Look at how clogged the paint is. I think this is why I have about as much respect for Michael Jordan and a lot of the older types of players than anybody else. You see Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown with the floor spacing, now even Luka Doncic. He wasn't dealing with this. This is crazy. You have 3 dudes in the paint.
Inside the arc, drilling 8 of his 12 two-point shots. Poor Clyde Drexler was left in single coverage most of the time, and if it wasn't the patented fadeaway that did him in, Jordan used his quickness to drive by Clyde into space and then float in mid-range pillows. In pick and roll, the Blazers sent a second defender to jump Michael, but Jordan shed him for more mid-range magic. So when Game 2 rolled around, Jordan shed him.
Look at the paint again. You have to have a great mid-range when this is the defense they're playing. This is ridiculous.
Mid-range magic. So when Game 2 rolled around, the Blazers radically changed their defensive strategy. First by doubling him in the post so he couldn't feast on fadeaways down there, and then bringing extra defenders when possible to help on his drives. And these adjustments did make a difference, leading to some turnovers and some easy scores for Portland. But they also put Jordan in a position to set up his teammates for wide open shots. So his most prolific three-point shooting
Bill
game
Cartwright
led to his most prolific three-point shooting game in the playoffs led to one of his most prolific playmaking games in the playoffs.
That's
setting
a disgusting
up open
jumper.
Shot after wide open shot for his teammates throughout the night. Of course, even when they sent help, Jordan's individual scoring brilliance was still on display. There are 3 Blazers lurking here.
There's 5 Blazers in the paint.
And this time he spins away from the help, and
look at this. I mean, come on, man.
Just insanity. Since he finished with 39 points, Jordan's scoring pressure also created a ton of shots for teammates himself. Here's one in transition where he crosses right, hangs in the air, and kicks it out for an open 3, and he actually looked back to the trailer to freeze the defense before snapping it to the corner for that jumper.
Such a good pass.
All told, I tracked a whopping 15 shots created like this for teammates, which is a hard number to hit historically. For perspective, in the entire...
I mean, it would have been so easy to play with Michael Jordan. I mean, if you get a pass, you just got to shoot it.
Entire 2011 playoffs, the single game high I tracked was 14. So Jordan was a playmaking machine in this game, despite also dropping nearly 40. Portland tried other defenders on Michael besides Drexler, but he took smaller players like Terry Porter or Danny Ainge to the post, and against bigger defenders, he was just too quick off the dribble, and that's one less big body to stop him at the rim. This was actually a theme during Jordan's first 3 NBA Finals. The Lakers' starting 2-guard Byron Scott was too small for him in the post, and he torched the Suns in '93 because they lacked agile wing defenders who could stay in front of him. Actually, that Phoenix series was a perfect storm because they had very little rim protection once Jordan shed his defender.
I mean, this dude Tom Chambers is like, are you kidding me? He's not.
His finishing ability made him nearly unstoppable.
Neither's Charles.
He was way too quick for Dan Marley, who lacked the foot speed to slide with him on the outside. And when the Suns tried a bigger forward like Richard Dumas, he was again unequipped to move with Michael on the perimeter. Tom Chambers is playing center here, and he's too deep under the hoop and barely gets above 9 feet.
But like, look at what he's doing. This is on 4 guys.
On his contest because he's not a shot blocker. If Jordan blew by Dumas and Charles Barkley was at the rim, he offered even less resistance on these drives. When Phoenix went to a quicker defender like Kevin Johnson, MJ had a size advantage and took him right back to the post. In game 4
I ain't gonna lie, MJ looking tough.
Series, Jordan scored 33 in the first half en route to 55 overall, and it wasn't just tactical mismatches, but more of his spectacular long-range shooting.
You just can't
Although
guard
this time it was mostly from just inside the three-point line. In his greatest peaks profile, we saw a more physically gifted MJ. His first step was a touch quicker, his motor revved a little higher, but by 1992 he became a deadly outside shooter, putting on displays like this during critical playoff games. This is from the closeout game in the first round of 1992, and Jordan would just regularly stroke long jumper after long jumper like this.
It just looks so pure. Like, and y'all not gonna like this comparison, but mid-range wise, it's reminding me of Kawhi. Like, genuinely. Like, obviously MJ is better than Kawhi. I'm not saying that, but just like how, pure he is from that area. That's what it reminds me of.
And he did it while somehow maintaining great efficiency for his time. Probably because this version of Michael was one of the greatest mid-range shooters in league history. One Real GM poster named Dipper13 tracked over 1,500 Jordan jumpers from 1990 to 1992.
I mean, look at the mid-range. 51% from the mid-range. If you shoot 51% from the mid-range, you just can't be guarded. Genuinely, you cannot. Nobody's going to get stops.
And had his mid-range accuracy at 51%, which sounds completely reasonable after watching him torture teams in these playoff runs.
It's ridiculous.
Some of these shots are basically works of art, and this was one of the best scoring displays I've ever seen.
But he has a way of getting his shot, like enough space to get that
Slicing
shot
up Miami in basically every phase of the game. The Knicks defended him well in 1992 and 93, even holding him to a 3 for 18 shooting game that year, only for MJ to go off in the very next game, dropping in 6 more threes in a 54-point outing
54?
to tie the series at 2 games apiece. So, even if Jordan lost a touch off his fastball by 1992 and 1993, he was still otherworldly. Which brings us back to our original questions. How did the Bulls perform with him in the game? And what happened when Jordan went to the bench during the 1990s?
I want to know, with Jordan, when Scottie Pippen was obviously took over or whatever, how did they make it so far still? Because they don't look
good. In
good.
1990, Phil Jackson arrived and installed the triangle offense, which was mostly in full swing by the time Chicago hit the playoffs that year. The Bulls again bowed out to the eventual champion Pistons in 7 hard-fought games. But in Jordan's playoff minutes that season, the Bulls outscored their opponents by over 7 points per 48, a jump into championship-level territory. In 2 seasons, Chicago had completely reshaped the roster around Jordan, with Charles Oakley, Sam Vincent, Dave Corzine, and Brad Sellers out, replaced by Bill Cartwright, Craig Hodges, B.J. Armstrong, and Stacey King, along with the emergence of their supporting stars, Horace Grant, and of course, Scottie Pippen. So in 1991, when the Bulls broke through, they were a whopping 13.5 points better than their opponents with Jordan.
Like, that's like, I don't want to say it, but that's like what the Celtics have done in the playoffs this year.
On the floor, and they still outscored their opponents even when he went to the bench.
Not by
in
as
1992,
much, though.
They weren't as dominant with Jordan in the game, but without him, lineups often spearheaded by Pippen, the Bulls again outscored their opponents. In 93, the numbers were similar, although his teammates were outscored by a few points when he wasn't in the game. Remember, we want...
Again, all these sample sizes matter. That's the thing I want you guys to realize.
To eliminate some of the noise by tracking multiple seasons.
Yeah, I was
So
gonna
if we
say.
combine these seasons and look at multi-year stretches, we start to see a pattern. As the years progress, the Bulls look better and better without Jordan, improving from a team with essentially no chance at a title to one that looks like a really good supporting cast in the playoffs. If we compare these numbers to larger minute stretches, Jordan's supporting cast went from the 0th percentile to the 37th percentile and ultimately into the top 25% of supporting.
So I mean, it's starting to make sense why even without Jordan, they were decent. It really is.
Players. If we include the 94 Bulls, who played 10 full playoff games without Michael, we see a pretty steady rate of growth into the mid-90s without Jordan in the game. Now remember, these numbers are still a little sensitive to hot and cold stretches, and more importantly, this is really about Jordan's value on the Bulls specifically. Who was his backup, or how did they structure the lineups without him in the game? With that said, I wanted to see how Jordan and the Bulls compared to other high-minute players who made deep playoff runs over multiple seasons. The horizontal axis is how good the team was when the player was on the court, and the vertical axis is how much the team improved with the player in the game. These are all the players who logged 1,500 playoff minutes and 500 minutes on the bench over multi-year stretches.
I want to see who the guy is way up there.
1997.
That's what I want to see.
The player with the largest change is David Robinson.
Okay.
The Spurs were 25 points better with him from 1998 to 2001.
That's crazy.
Although Robinson wasn't his team leader in minutes, so his lineups could have been more favorable for a stat like this. Among minute leaders, Shaq's Lakers were 21 points better with him in the playoffs from 2000 to 2004, and LeBron's teams were 19 points better from 2016 to 2021. Jordan's best stretch came from 1989 to 93, where the Bulls were 14 points better with him in the game. So this is a great number, but isn't quite as emphatic as Shaq's or even LeBron's.
It's good, though. Like, it's still good. And remember, this stat's not like the be-all, end-all. It is a good stat, though. But Jordan's still pretty good. Like, I still don't hate where he's at right now. It's still pretty good.
The Bulls' best stretch with Michael on the floor includes that second three-peat, where from 1991 to 96, they were nearly 9 points better than the competition, short of Curry's monstrous plus 12, but still one of the best stretches on record. The 96 Bulls went an incredible 87-13, a record that still stands to this day. Although the
Wait, what?
87-13, a record that still stands to this day. Although the 1991 team was actually slightly better with Jordan on the floor during the playoffs. For those final three championships, Michael was older and less explosive, although he was stronger and craftier than ever. That strength let him operate out of the post, commanding double teams that freed up his teammates, and he could overpower defenders down there, and then, instead of an acrobatic finish, kick it out to a wide open shooter.
Look at Kukoc. He's just knocking him down.
Michael's size and body control really stand out in these years, feeling a defender on his back before spinning away to collapse the defense and set up a teammate. And even though he lost some of that quickness, he could still stop on a dime to create space, and despite all the jukes and spins, he just seemed to be in total control of his body at all times. This was never more apparent than in the evolution of his fadeaway, where he couldn't always out-jump his defender, so he had to
realize how tough of a shot he just hit is?
Alter his shot in the air. This meant changing the angle of his body and the arc of the jumper, looping it over a nearby hand. He also used the pump fake more to create a little extra breathing room to fire, and he could do all this while reclining his body at extreme angles while he was in the air. This is like a pool shark learning all the tricks and bounces of the table, his mind adapting in real time to lean back a little more or aim the shot just a little higher.
It's just ridiculous. The mid-range game is honestly something That is a lost art now, but it's special to watch somebody do it like MJ did.
His defense was also really impressive in those final Chicago seasons, using his strength and anticipation to contain the ball and maintaining a relatively high motor on that end despite being longer in the tooth. His hands were as destructive as ever, and he actually gambled less during those second three-peat years compared to his more chaotic style when he was younger, and even that risk-taking was often calculated and precise. As a result, he actually put up some of the more impressive plus-minus numbers in his playoff career, where the Bulls were outscored by 3 points without him during the 96 playoffs, but then crushed teams by 13 points per 48 with...
That's a ridiculous number. And people got to realize, like, again, this stat's not perfect, but MJ's going to play most of the minutes, too. So
Jordan on the floor. The NBA officially started tracking plus-minus in 1997, and he looks great there, too, as well as in 1998. So, what can we make of all this? Well, despite the noise in plus-minus stats...
I mean, look. I think what you can say is that MJ, the plus minus stat supports people who want to call him the GOAT. I think that's what it is.
I find these numbers incredible.
But I will say it's crazy that they made it as far as they did without him.
Important for a few reasons. First, they affirm that Jordan's supporting cast radically improved during their title-winning seasons, not necessarily Michael himself. As we discussed in his Greatest Peaks profile, MJ looked superhuman before Chicago won a title. He just needed the right teammates to climb the mountain.
And that's how it is, though, even in basketball now. Like, the best player isn't going to win a championship this year. The Celtics don't have a top 5 player in the league.
Second, both of the three peoples looked great when Jordan was on the floor, with their second 3-year run falling
MJ.
just behind Steph Curry's Warriors during the Kevin Durant years. And finally, Jordan does not actually look like an outlier compared to other greats when he was on the court versus off it. His teams were plenty competitive without him, and when he was in the game, other all-time clubs were comparably dominant. Of course, there's enough variability in these numbers that the best player ever isn't guaranteed to have the best on-off ever.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think it supports him being the... If you want to say he's the GOAT, the numbers bear it out.
So, the debate will certainly rage on. But I'll leave you with this. After pouring through over 100 playoff games of Jordan and the Bulls, it's hard to find a more consistently impressive decade of playoff performances in the entire history of the NBA, and the numbers certainly back that up.
Yeah, he was efficient, he was good, he did it all, man. And again, I think to win a championship, you have to have talent around you. You do. It is surprising that they were as good as they were without MJ. That's the one thing that kind of shocks me, but MJ was ridiculously good. Shout out to my guy thinking basketball. Drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're new. As always, man, I love you guys. Have a blessed day.